Hi everyone, happy Monday. We just discussed with Roloff in the pre-chat that happy Mondays or Mondays don't have to be happier than anything else, but that I usually say happy Monday because I feel like they shouldn't be less happy than any other day. And we hope that our conversation in the next 20 minutes will bring a bit of positivity and inspiration and motivation to your week, to your day, and you will feel like it's a happy Monday. So together with me is Roloff here again, with, as every Monday nowadays, and we're going to talk about one of the topics that we have a post about in the Helix of Success group. Hi, Roloff.
Hi, good morning. Good morning to you. That's right. Good afternoon to me. Good morning to you. I like the nice international flavor that we have different time zones.
Yeah, it's good. We're adding that every time, right? Today we're going to talk about the storytelling in leadership and the three different dimensions or layers of storytelling in leadership that all leaders could use for getting their message across and for more. Could you talk a bit more about why storytelling is important and what are those three layers are?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start with why is storytelling important? Storytelling is important because it's by far the oldest and deepest form of knowledge transfer that the human race has. We have done storytelling probably going back, well, as soon as we probably could talk, and perhaps even before we could actually talk, we had probably had stories. So at least for 100,000 years or 200,000 years, storytelling has been and I think, and it's maybe even coupled into our DNA. So storytelling is the most gets to the core in terms of gaining knowledge and building knowledge, and it's only, of course, I would say just around 6,000 years ago. I'm guessing here that storytelling and then the verbal storytelling, got caught onto. I was going to say paper, but it wasn't paper. It was probably clay tablet first, and then another 2,000 years later, it came onto paper, which of course themselves were also stories. But the storytelling really we're talking about here is the human to human storytelling, and so it's important because it's the most it gets to the deepest core of us as a person. So that's why storytelling is important. So coming to the second question here, maybe the third question, is why storytelling and leadership? And because what we're talking about here is that aspect of leadership which is about change and about effecting change. And leadership may have different perspectives, but certainly what we're talking about here is leadership to effectuate change. And to do that, you want to use a storytelling narrative, which I just mentioned. Which brings us perhaps to the aspect about this is that storytelling sort of breaks down into three categories or three things. It's the story of me, it's the story of us, and it's the story of now. And what are those three concepts and why are they important? So the story of me is really about why I think change is important. And and the deeper aspect of that is really why should you trust me? Why should you believe in me? I'll put it that way. And so I have to make clear in the story of me, why is it important to me? Why is it fundamental to me? So that's just the story. And what changes do I hope to achieve? And what changes will I go through myself as a leader in terms of trying to effectuate that change? Uh, Change itself is great, but changing is very difficult and it's very painful. So you're looking to get that discussion about the changing that takes place there. So that's the first step. In other words, is why should you believe in me? That's the second story. The other one is actually kind of interesting, which is the story of us, which is about establishing commonality. But the interesting question you're answering actually there is, why should you, the leader, whatever, believe in us? What is credible about us that that we should participate in this change? So it's really asking the inverse, the other question to it. Why should I believe in you, and why should you believe in me? And those two concepts together are sort of the deeper fundamental, I wouldn't say moral, but deeper drivers of commonality. So the commonality is really, it's perhaps, you could think of a commonality of vision, but really it's about a commonality of belief. So to get to that change, we need to believe in each other. And that's the part of the leadership to the change process is about believing in each other, having each other's backs at a certain point, sponsoring each other, helping each other. These are all very essential parts of change.
I want to pause here for two reflections and question, like one reflection, one question, Roland. One is, you talk about the change, right? Or that we're now covering the communication of change as part of leadership. And I've always been thinking, what is leadership for me? And this is actually the question I start with every communication or every interview for my podcast, Genius Leadership. I ask, what is leadership and who is a leader for you? And for me, it's about influence, really. And for that, you can actually talk about, with that definition, you can talk about the dark leadership, for example. There's the dark triad of it. And of course, the positive leadership that we all want to see in the world. And listening to you now, I thought about, like, actually, yes, influence. We as leaders always want to influence people for a change, right? It's always about continuous progress. It's always about continuous development and us together striving to get to the next level, whatever this next level is, and to the next goal of ours. So for me, it just was interesting reflection that, yeah, maybe I need to expand that definition of leadership and not only talk about the influence as the primary feature of it or characteristic, but also about that it's always about the change, because nothing is constant, nothing is stable, and we always move, and we just need to accept it that the change is the only constant, right, nowadays.
Yeah, so agreed. And so influence and leadership are not the same. I mean, you can have a lot of influence, if you have a lot of money and spread it around, and people will demonstrate behaviors that you want to see. But that has nothing to do with leadership. So influence is, of course, is a mechanism. So in other words, to be an impactful leader, you need influence. If you don't have the influence, you don't have the power to bring about change, nothing's going to happen. So yeah, so influence is, of course, is important in a leadership role, but influence in and of itself does not demonstrate leadership. So it's good to separate the two.
The other point I wanted to, like, that could be a whole topic of itself, I would say, defining leadership and good aspects of it and not, and so on. But what I wanted to ask you is, why did you start with the story of you and then went to the story of us? Why don't we do the other way around? And isn't it selfish to start with the story of myself and my motivations for the change that we're trying to communicate and bring people along with?
No, I don't think it's selfish. I think it's that it's the natural question that people have first. I mean, if you're the one who's initiating, so you're the one who has to come and demonstrate, I would say, trust by putting yourself out there and saying, this is why I want to do this. This is why it's this is important, and this is why I think you can trust me, because that's the first question anybody has. The first question is can I believe in you, and can I trust you? And only when that question is answered, you come to the second question, maybe, do you believe in me, and do you trust me? Because I think that's the order in which you answer and answer those questions. So I think
Yeah,
it
it's
is.
actually a very good point. Yeah, because if we don't answer this question of, or we don't cover the story of you first, people are not listening to us and not really receptive to what we're saying in the story of us, because they're like, who are you? Why are you talking about this? Right? What's your
Yeah,
motivation? What's here?
yeah.
So it's kind of an
What's your
elephant
what's
in the
your
room
agenda?
if we don't
Yeah,
start with that.
yeah,
Great.
yeah. So what's
I
your
think it was good
agenda?
to cover that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the order is important. So and then you come to the third one category, and come back to the leadership. I think there are two major roles that leadership have. One is about change, um, and the other one, which we have discussed in the past, is about performance. Now, of course, you can say improvement in performance is a form of change. That is quite true. But I think there are differences. I mean, there is so you could say performance, we whatever, we're achieving this, we need to get to a next level. That is less of I'd say it is a change, but it's less of a deep change than the change that we often talk about here, which is we have to change the way our behaviors. And again, of course, they overlap, but the change, the story about the leader is really about the more significant change, which really requires more trust. The other one is more of a perhaps what a trainer would do or a coach is doing in the sense of trying to get you to a better level. You run at 10.4 and you want to get it down to a 10.2, or in our case, it's probably about a 23.4 and get it down to a 23.3. I mean, so there's less a sense of trusting of the coach. You just think, okay, he's doing his work, and he probably knows what he's doing. It doesn't get as deep into your core as when, of course, you want to change somebody's values or morals, I suppose, or behavior. That's where trust becomes much more important. So we go to the part about the commonality, and the third bit about this is, okay, agreed, and the story is the story of now. And the story of now is really the sense of urgency. So it's why us, and why now? Why do we need to fix this or change this now? This has been around like this for a year, a week, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. What's the reason that you need to tackle it now? What makes it important to do it now? Is it because it's suddenly become urgent? Is it something because we can solve it now? Can be other reasons, but you need to get that sense of movement into this. So we can all agree, this is something that should change, but that doesn't make a change. And you have to start the changing. And that's the story of now, is to start that change. Right? So that brings you through the story of me, the story of us, and the story of now. 3 kind of simple guidelines in terms of effectuating change, really, from a leadership viewpoint.
I want to get practical here. I myself, I'm still learning to tap into the power of storytelling, and I know that I can talk a bit more on the theoretical level, or maybe just give fewer examples that I could have given with my experience and stories from my clients. So, how can a leader get into a habit of storytelling, and how can a leader practice of telling better stories or telling the stories in a better way, more effective way?
Oh, that's well, first off, the stories. I mean, there are a couple of things that make storytelling powerful, and that's got to do with leadership. Obviously, it has to connect. So the stories that are closer to the leader's personal experience are stories that work the best. So it's always great. I remember whenever I had to do presentations, somehow I would try to figure out a story about something I screwed up. That's always the best stories. If something that you screwed up, that really went wrong. And starting out with those kind of stories are really the best stories. And there's 2 reasons for that. First off, everybody's interested, in hearing about how somebody screwed up. You always get somebody's attention immediately. So that's interesting. So there's a lot of news value there. You can learn something from it, obviously. So you learn really from your failures, perhaps more than you learn from your successes. So that's a second point. But the third point is that you also create you create safety. Because if I'm saying that I can screw up, what I'm pretty much saying is I'm giving you a license to say without judgment anything that you screwed up on. So you immediately create a sense of safety there, and and you open yourself up because you're exposing yourself. You also demonstrate that you feel secure. Also, so it's safe for you, and it's safe for me. So those are aspects I would say. I mean, that's one of the storytellers. So it's personal. Certainly, there is a message in there, obviously. So I mean, it should be a functional story. So there is something somebody takes. It's not a joke you just tell. There should be a value in that. I think that is, and obviously, people should be able to relate to it. So there should be a commonality there. There should be something in there that works. I'm just thinking here of, I remember somebody who was, it was during the pandemic, and some businessman, some rich man would say, look, I'm okay. And it was literally that. They did a post and they said, I'm okay, so don't worry about me because I'm on my boat here. There was a photo of a 150-foot yacht or something like that. That was not a good story because obviously the people he said that could not relate to that because they don't have a boat. So that was an example of a bad story because it wasn't relatable to somebody's situation.
I want to tap into the your suggestion of giving the story or starting with the story of your own failure or where you screwed up. I think this is very triggering for many leaders, and I think it's very important to emphasize that this is a great example of how you can actually be vulnerable and authentic. What those two buzzwords that everyone is using about the leadership nowadays, that's how you should be as a leader. But yeah, if you feel like you're not sure how to be that, try to tell a story when you screwed up, when you didn't manage something from the first time, and so on. These stories have so much power, and I think it's very good point that you mentioned that if you don't feel comfortable sharing that story, that probably means that you don't feel secure. And think about it. If you as a leader don't feel safe and secure in this environment, in this conversation, how should your employees feel that? You really need to start and show by your own example that, hey, it's safe here to grow together, to fail together, and to learn together. And it's very important to show it from your own experience. And just as you, Rolof, said, that just bring your own story. And you can start with some small story, maybe some small failure of yours if you really feel uncomfortable and you really need to get into the habit of doing that. And then try to challenge yourself. And every next time you're sharing, share something bigger. Share something that affected you more. Share something that made you grow and learn more. And that's the way of getting those reps in, really building the muscle of being authentic and vulnerable. And by that, really leading your people and showing them that's okay. You're not expecting them to be perfect.
Yeah, because with those stories, you're quite right. What you do is you are deepening your story of me, which is important. You have to give that depth. So it's not about, again, it sounds like you're on a sort of ego trip because you're talking about, but giving an in-depth story of yourself is essential. It is important because it's the depth that brings the trust. You think that somebody is, has no hidden agenda, or says this is my hidden agenda, which means it isn't hidden at all. But by all means, you do that. So you make a story of me, and of course, when you do that, you demonstrate it. It helps, of course, others to do the same thing also, which then creates the story of us. It builds up the commonality. So it's a symbiotic process, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. We're almost at the 20 minutes mark here. Do you, one question from me, maybe you have more and we can extend a bit, but I would like to ask you, the mentees of yours, all the entrepreneurs that you have been having the chance to mentor in your years of experience, what is the biggest struggles usually, and what do you suggest them to overcome those struggles when it comes to storytelling?
Well, it does. Well, obviously there is sometimes a sense of insecurity. Am I doing the right thing? I don't really know. So I will actually very definitely make a point in perhaps in the first 10 minutes of a conversation, talk about something I screwed up, you know. I mean, basically, I kind of I said the reason why we're here is because I screwed up so many times. So that's so the hope is that you don't screw up as many times. You're going to screw up, so you're not putting the pressure. So you're not going to screw up, but you could decide to say, well, maybe you don't need to screw up as many times as I screwed up. That's so that's the very first thing you do there. Is again establishing this safe space, and perhaps that they also take away that they themselves build the ability to create to build their own safe spaces. After that, it's often discussions about focus. Really, are you focused? There'll be so many things going on in their minds about there's so many new things that they'll be pulled in so many different directions that they really kind of find themselves, chasing their own tails. So a lot of the discussion is about focus and going through really. I mean, so it's again, it's startups that I mentor in particular. So and that's you go back to the basic questions. Okay, so who really is your customer, and how often you actually talk to them, and do people really want this? Is this a need to have, nice to have? So you really kind of go through this. I would say a pretty standardized set of questions, which I got quite a few posts on LinkedIn, and that's the conversations that I have. But it's the security aspect, really, and being willing to be open and vulnerable. I find young people actually, or younger, actually, that are often the cases. Maybe people who get into startups already often have that mindset. They're willing to take a risk, so they are willing to fail most, I think. And I think if you don't, then probably you self-select yourself out of going into a startup because you think, well, that's a lot of risk and I might fail. So that has to be the willingness to fail, of course, is also combined with, of course, the fact how secure do you feel? How close is failure going to be affecting you as a person? You hopefully it won't. It will just be considered to be a learning experience, and maybe you think, okay, I have to go through one or two or three failures to get to that.
Yeah, I've been there myself. I have been thinking about starting my own business for quite some years, but I was like, no, not now. I'm not taking those risks right now. And it just took the change of the country as the kind of the kick in the pants or in the skirt to actually do that finally and feel like, yeah, I'm ready to risk the things. So I know what you're talking about. Anything you would like to finish off with, Rolof, on this topic?
No, I think I've said enough. I don't have anything special to say than what I've already said.
Then let's encourage our viewers and listeners or viewers to really build that narrative of the 3 dimensions, the story of you, the story of us, and the story of now. Try it. Try to write down some things or talk to a friend of yours or colleague, a teammate, a mentor maybe, and try to boil it down to 3 sentences, for example, one for each of the dimensions, and see, does it make sense together? Do I feel like I could connect to that story myself if I would be on the other side? Just practice it, and really don't be afraid. That's another thing that you can fail with and learn from it. It's really about trying and seeing what works, seeing what helps you connect with people and get them on board and have them on board with you all the time. And there is no perfect way here. There is no wrong way here. There is just the way that is undone. And that's the worst thing. When you are afraid of failing with your story, and that's why you don't open up your mouth and share it.
That's the real failure. And you don't if you don't try it. Yeah, agreed.
Thank you so much, Rolof. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you. I'm always getting lots of insights and also getting clear on my thoughts and crystallizing them. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you also. It's mutual.
I'm happy for that. And everyone, if you feel like you would like to have more of these conversations, please join our LinkedIn group, Helix of Success. We have around 100 posts there that we are discussing. And hopefully see you next Monday.